Hello everyone, it is June 20th, 2025 when I'm recording this video. I'm not sure exactly what day you're going to see it. It'll probably be next week sometime. But I wanted to go over what has become an increasingly hot button issue, which is the sale of federal lands. Senator Mike Lee of Utah was trying to put through, as part of the Big Beautiful Bill, is trying to insert a provision that would allow the federal government to sell some federal lands to develop housing, to help alleviate housing shortages in the United States. Many western cities, places like Salt Lake City, like Denver, they have very limited land on which to build. Seattle will be another example. And so the idea is that as a way to reduce housing prices would be to open up some nearby federal land so that housing could be built on it. Now, what there is now is a disinformation campaign against that. Now, let me be clear, whether you support the bill or not is entirely your opinion. I'm not going to tell you that it's a good bill or a bad bill. I just want to get into what does this bill actually say versus what to me is just a lot of propaganda against it. You're seeing lots of pictures of like Yellowstone or the Grand Tetons and saying, we cannot sell off our most pristine lands. We cannot sell off our, our national parks, and seeing people say, oh, they're trying to sell Yellowstone or trying to sell Yosemite. None of that is true. So let's talk about what's actually, now you may decide that after hearing this that you're like, I still think it's a bad bill and they shouldn't do it. Great, no problem. I'm not going to argue with you on that, but I want to go over what does the bill actually do. First, it allows the Secretary of the Interior to sell, albeit with a lot of restrictions, between 0.5 and 0.75% of federal land. So this is half to 0.75% of federal lands. This is a one-time deal. Now, one of the arguments being given in favor of this is, well, we can use the money to help offset the deficit. Any sale proceeds, yes, they would help offset the deficit a tiny amount one time. In the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make any real difference. So I think that's a pretty weak argument. But nonetheless, that is part of the justification for it. But either way, back to this, the bill itself. At worst, 99.25% of all federally owned lands are off limits and cannot be sold under this bill. So want to get that point out. Next thing to know, no federal land east of the Mississippi can be sold. So all federal land owned east of the Mississippi is off limits. So if you're thinking, well, what about the Great Smoky Mountain, National Park or something like that, or the Everglades? None of that's eligible. In fact, the sale of the land is limited to only 11 eligible states. Let me read you which ones they are. It is Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington, or Wyoming. That is 11 states. The other 39 states are ineligible for these land sales. So this would include western states such as Hawaii or Montana or North and South Dakota. Obviously, Great Plains states like Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, Iowa, they're all off too. And obviously Texas, which is a huge state, is out. So again, very limited. So it's no more than 0.75% and has to be limited to these 11 states. Okay, so those are our first limitations. Next limitation is what type of land may not be sold. And one thing that is very clear, if it is land managed by the National Park Service, which is over 80 million acres, all of that land is off limits. None of that can be sold. So all the people, they're going to sell Yellowstone, or they're showing you a picture of the Tetons. I've noticed that a lot. I've seen the pictures of the Teton Mountains a lot. None of that is eligible for sale. And not just strictly national parks. That's anything managed by the National Park Service. So that would include recreation areas, seashores, lake shores, monuments, historic battlefields. Anything by the National Park is off limits. But those are not all the restrictions. There are still some additional restrictions on top of that. Basically, all the land has to come from either the Bureau of Land Management or the National Forest System. By the way, the National Forest System is part of the Department of Agriculture because our national forests are agricultural land. We use it for tree farming, essentially. That's oversimplification, but you get the idea. Okay, so let's go to some of the other restrictions in terms of what kind of land cannot be sold. Any national conservation area, any land that is a national wildlife refuge system, anything that is part of a national fish hatchery system. I already mentioned national parks, anything that's part of a national preserve, a national seashore or national lakeshore. I'm reading directly from the bill. A national historic site, or a national memorial. Anything that's part of a national wilderness preservation system, a national wild and scenic river system, or part of a national trail system. That is all also ineligible for sale. So as we can see, a huge amount of land is actually the vast majority of federal lands are not even eligible to be considered for sale. Okay, so let's take a look at some additional things. So does this mean that the Secretary of the Interior can just sort of pick, I want to sell this, I want to sell that, subject to these restrictions? No. The Secretary of the Interior may accept nominations, and those nominations can come from three sources: the state government, the local government, or a private nomination. If it comes from state and local government, the Secretary of the Interior can just consider it as for sale. If it is a private nomination, then prior to agreeing to sell it, the Secretary of the Interior must do consults with the local government first. So basically, the Secretary of the Interior cannot even nominate the lands that get sold. It has to be nominated by the locals. So in other words, the state and local governments can only nominate their own lands, and even a private nomination must then be consulted with the local government. So it's got to come from locality. But wait, there's more. Excuse me. The requirement is that before anything is sold, it must show how it will affect local housing. It must be near an already developed area, and it must have access to nearby infrastructure. I'm sorry, I should say priority is given to those that are near developed areas and that have access to prior developed infrastructure. So basically, the Secretary cannot sell off 20,000 acres out in the middle of nowhere for a cattle ranch. They've got to sell it. It's got to be close. One, it's got to have been nominated by the locals. Two, it's got to be close to an area that's already developed. Three, it's got to have reasonable access to local infrastructure, things such as roads and utilities. Essentially, what this means in reality, is that federal lands, again, around western cities, think Salt Lake City, think Denver, think Seattle, think Portland, places like that. That is really the only areas where there's going to be any land even potentially eligible for sale, and those lands have to meet all those other requirements, like they can't be part of the national park system, they can't be part of a national trail system, they can't be part of a national fish hatchery system, things like that. And again, they have to be in one of the 11 allowable states. The other 39 states are just simply out of the question. So the point of all of this is that no, there is no way that this is going to sell the national parks, or that this is going to sell these incredible pristine lands or anything like this. This is largely unused federal land near urban centers that is already close to built up infrastructure. And that is not part of any one of a dozen different categories of preserved and protected lands. And there's even one more thing. Any land sales are subject to any rights that are already on it. So if there are leases with, like, let's say it's some BLM land, and maybe it's near Tucson or Phoenix, and maybe there's some BLM, there's leases with the BLM land. Maybe there's leases for ranching or for oil drilling or something like that. It has to be sold subject to those leases. It cannot abrogate the leases. So yet another restriction is on it. And of course, the Secretary of the Interior can't pick which lands get nominated. That has to come from the locals. So this is extremely heavily restricted. There's actually relatively very little land that actually will even be eligible. The federal government owns 640 million acres of land, the vast majority of which is ineligible automatically. And then of those sections that are eligible, there are further restrictions that have to be put on. So is this going to result in the national park system getting sold off or something like this? No, absolutely not. That's ridiculous propaganda. Now, you may hear all this and think, I think it's a bad bill and I don't think it should be sold. That is, again, like I said before, that is perfectly fine. I'm not going to try to change your mind on it, but I just want you to understand the reality of what is in this bill versus what you are being told, because a lot of people are saying a lot of things and they're using a lot of pictures of things like Yosemite and stuff that are just simply not true. None of that, it would even be eligible. I saw someone was posting about, don't sell the Everglades. Not 1 square inch of the Everglades can be sold under this law. I saw another person who posted about, like, oh great, they're going to sell the Great Smokies. Not 1 inch of Great Smoky Mountain National Park can be sold under this law. And the same for Yosemite and the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone and all the other parks and stuff out there. So if you are worried, does this mean that I will not be able to take my kids camping in the Great Western National Parks? I can't go to Zion or whatever? No, that is absolutely not going to happen. Now, does it mean it's a good bill? Personally, I think yes, because I think Western states need more land for housing. Some people may disagree with me. That's totally fine, but please know it is not the Wild West free-for-all that is being presented as. All right, thank you. Hope you have a good day.